This is a tale of making a dream come true, of the crazy enterprise of youth in the 1960s, and of the building and the sailing of a beautiful boat through the creative fusions of two very different cultures. In the summer of 1964, Rod Pickering took 3 friends from Architectural College sailing with him. They had already signed a contract to go to Uganda to work, but were enjoying their summer of freedom, sailing around the French rivers and ending up in Alderney, one of the Channel Islands between France and England, where they met me, Di Beach. I joined them for the sail back to the mainland, and Rod and I fell for each other. And despite strong parental opposition, I flew out to Uganda to marry him a few months later. Rod had grown up in a South End sailing family and inherited an unquenchable passion for the sea and small boats. In addition to his mastery of sailing, he had a genius for improvisation and solving seemingly intractable problems. Without his vision and drive, the events of this film could not have happened.
I am sailing home again, across the sea. I am flying, passing high clouds, to be where you, to be free.
Started in Uganda. Uganda, when Rodney and I and Manuel were there, was run by a Prime Minister called Milton Obote. There was a revolution. Revolt was put down with a great deal of brutality by Milton Obote and his right-hand man called Idi Amin. You were confined in the evenings. They had a curfew from 6 in the night to 6 in the morning. If you went out at night, you were simply shot and cleaned up by the dustman the next morning. So we had no choice but to stay at home. And Rodney had found this box of books, sailing books, in some shop in Uganda, and he started to read them voraciously, and I looked at them a bit, and somehow this, I guess, a combination of claustrophobia, being shut up at night, and these books sort of suddenly made Rodney think, the idea of building a boat and sailing it back to England. Now, we had our contract with the Uganda/British government was such that we got, if we finished a 2-year contract, we get 25% of what we had been paid, of our pay over 2 years, which is 50%. In other words, we get a good lot of money, which is the equivalent of half a year's salary. So with this, plus the money for our tickets, which they refunded us, plus the savings we made, because we couldn't go out and waste our money in the evenings, because there weren't any evenings. You live very cheaply in Uganda. Plus all this enabled us to save up a fair amount of money, which we thought would suffice to build a boat and take us home. Then we could sell it for a mint, and there we are.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting in the evening.
This is the waterfront of Lamu, lovely little town, the Venice of Kenya.
Then I watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay.
Yeah, well, going along the waterfront, you'll come shortly to the house where we lived while all the time we were building the boat. That is our house, isn't it?
No.
That's Peckley's.
Yes,
that's
yeah, that was our
That's
house.
Peckley's. That's the hotel.
This is the hotel. It was a pub hotel run by a Cockney
Called
delightful.
Darky.
And this is wasn't this the governor's
That's
palace?
the governor's house. So we were well located. We had the hotel, governor's house on one side, and we were on the other.
And there are lots of cows around, which lived in the wattle huts with the people. didn't they?
Yeah, all lived together.
Yeah.
That's common as well. These are the locals.
Here's Colin.
There's another local.
Another local. This is the main street.
This is a decent Gulf of Lamu.
Yeah.
As you see, they have these carts. This is the only way they can carry things around with carts. And of course, it is maritime based. All the boats used to come up from Mombasa, the dhows, sailing boats, and dump their stuff there. They used to have the plane used to come in once a week and bring what they called Nkati wa Slacy, sliced white bread. And the locals loved it. They had very good bakeries. They could make pitotte and this sort of thing. Mjojo Wa Lamu was the big hit.
This is the main square. This is wonderful trees. I know what trees they are.
So it's
Acacia?
mango tree. The mango supplied the whole town when in season, enormous. They had a butcher, people used to buy, there's no refrigeration, you used to buy your meat for the day, kill a cow and sheep off, and go and buy your meat for the day, and he used to give you a little packet, a bit of tail, a bit of ear, a bit of steak mignon, a bit of everything, in a little packet tied up with a grass, and that's how you had your meat. It was very democratic.
It was Eid al-Fitr, I think.
Oh yeah, they're Muslims. Muslims. They're very liberal Muslims, even though they had these people in Purda there, but most people didn't.
The experience of living in Lamu, of being out of the box, out of our mundane existence, and into another civilization, which I didn't realize then. I took it as an adventure. I didn't realize quite what a conservative society it was there in Lamu. You know, I saw it as exotic. But being out of my environment and being in this new environment, you suddenly sort of began to realize who you are and what you are. I tried it, but nobody filmed me. This is cutting down the wood we're using, and the trees are from the mainland. Basically, the shipwrights would go and look at a tree and decide that that particular cut would suit the boat. And so they would take these chunks of wood, often in fork shape, sometimes logs, very, very heavy. It wasn't a very heavy wood.
Very heavy wood, yeah.
And it's not seasoned, of course. So they would season it by leaving it in salt water.
Yeah.
Salt water.
Seasoned by reverse osmosis.
Yeah.
Today, when you build boats, you bend the wood in various ways in order to make the ribs. In this case, they didn't have the facilities for bending the ribs, and so you simply cut off the parts of the tree which fitted the shape of the boat. And it's very skilled because the shipwright, this woodcutter, knew exactly how many of each and what size. He used to go and say, I want this, this, and this, and they brought them in, and every part fitted. They just squared it off and fitted. It's fantastic. They had an eye memory for three-dimensional forms.
Yeah. Bringing the wood home.
These are tiny little boats just to use for bringing stuff from island to island. They would not be stable in the Indian Ocean. All this bays, it's all sheltered there.
Here, the boat is beginning to build the boat. You can see the front of the boat.
Yeah. I forgot what it's called. And they're temporary ribs.
Yeah.
They made temporary ribs out of a softwood to get the shape of the boat. Beds the planks around it. I then took the temporary ribs out to put the new ribs in. And they alternately V-shape and round shape like that.
It's totally back to front to how it would be done in the West. Now here, this is interesting. This is the way they twisted the planks, because the boat doesn't work in straight lines. It works in curved forms. And they did it by putting some sort of asphalt over the...
It's a mixture of oil, coconut oil and camel dung or something.
And then they would make a tourniquet and basically twist the plank. And they knew how much to twist it. That's the point. And then when the planks were put in, the skin of planks, they had to waterproof the joints, and they did this by caulking it with cotton. It's quite advanced. I came...
You came late. Dave joined us after we'd already begun, actually. And so the beginning, initial stages of the building the boat we don't really see. But it wasn't very interesting. Here we're hoisting up one of the main cross beams.
There's a young
Colin, not helping, but not really helping, I don't think. There's someone who's pulling at the top there. I think that's the main help. But everything was a challenge here, because we had no technology. Everything had to be done by hand. Everything had to be worked out more or less in terms of fundamental human muscle power. We had no machines. We had to build, because it's very hot there, we had to build this roof over the top to keep the sun off so the workmen could work in the shade. Because it got pretty hot. We were on the equator. Although we always had a sea breeze, the climate was nice, it was still hot work. Here they're putting in the one of the main cross beams.
And here's Rodney, our captain, with his explaining. Really don't know how much Fundi Musli understood, explaining how the.
I think we're launching. I think
Is this the launching?
I think it is one of the ways he's thinking of making some sort of framework to launch the boat.
Now here
After we didn't do it that way, but that's one of the ideas he had of making a sort of a framework which you could launch it in, protect the boat while it's being launched.
Yeah, this is the hull has been built, and you see this is a bow drill. This is interesting. This is the way we drilled the holes. This is a little adze. And the other thing was a saw, isn't it?
The saw, yeah, the saw. And a chisel. And things took far, far longer, cost far, far more money than anticipated. We thought within a year we'd be home. This is nonsense. It took us 2 years to build the thing.
Here I am.
It's David.
Headless.
This is this balcony we talked about where we sat in this big house and overlooked the ocean. It's a lovely, lovely place. Getting how you see motion.
Here's Fundi Musli with these horrible cigars.
Brought them from Uganda. They bought illegally there. We thought we were saving up for a rainy day. When we came to open them, we tried to smoke them, it didn't work. We looked and they puffed and puffed, it didn't work. So anyway, we threw the cigars out because they didn't work. And next morning, we saw every owner of every house sitting at his doorstep with a bundle of cigars in his hand, trying frantically to puff them.
This jewellery, it's very cheap Shenzi jewellery. I thought I was going to make a fortune. And I bought up a lot of it, and I took it out to Mombasa to sell, and all the Indian merchants laughed at me and said it's totally worthless.
I sold it off bit by bit as we got poorer and poorer, and all the money went into building the boat and finishing the boat. All these things we bought initially was all sold off.
Actually, I wish I had some of this stuff.
There's Rodney and Fundi Musli, our shipwright. And these are all the beams which give the lateral stability to strength to the boat. The nails we used were big iron nails made in India, which I bought in Mombasa and had them galvanized. And they're hammered in, and they're about this long, and they're hammered in and bent over at the ends. They pulled the whole thing tight. And they countersank them so you could then add the hull without spoiling the blade of the adze.
Here they're putting in cotton, they're caulking all the joints, and basically they invite the whole village along, and they all join in, all the shipwrights join in, and in 1 or 2 days they caulk the whole boat. It actually isn't sufficient. We couldn't depend just on this. And also there's the tornado worms which tend to eat the wood. So we covered the boat eventually with fiberglass. Colin tried it as well.
Rodney is here setting up the water line. That blue line going horizontally is the line which we calculated would be the place where the water should be. And you had to know this because you had to know where to stop the fiberglass.
This is the fiberglass we're putting on the fibers. The locals thought we were putting a skirt around the boat.
Kikoi.
Kikoi, yeah.
Kikoi is a skirt, which what the traditional tuber cloth which the locals wear. This is a fiberglass screen, the cloth, then you embed it in resin, you paint resin on it, and it forms a hard skin which the tornado worm can't eat through.
These are the water tanks being put into position in the boat.
I made these in Mombasa, I had them made in Mombasa, and I set them up. There's 1,000 litres of water divided into 3 separate compartments, which is very important because one compartment the water could go bad, at least you know the other 2 are okay. And this was put in the centre of the boat because it's the main weight. It's a place where normally put the engine, but we had no engine, so we had room for the water tanks. This is the inside with all these ribs put in there. You can see the curve of the boat.
And the name of the boat, Mjojo, is named after Jojo, the child of Rodney and Di, and is a prefix in front of Swahili words which signifies a human being, I think. Yeah. Now here all the women are watching the launching. I think this was we were by the graveyard. And I think they were outside waiting for a funeral. They weren't allowed in.
Yeah. Yeah, we were sort of great curiosity to all the town because they'd never seen anything like it. Just building this crazy boat, these crazy white people.
Now we had to get the boat into the water, which it was a tremendous operation, and the only car on the island belonged to the district commissioner. I think he gave it to us, and we broke the clutch. We tried dragging it in, and it broke the clutch. So that didn't work. And then we had the Kenyan Navy.
Kenyan Navy.
The Kenyan Navy came.
British Navy. The
British officers serving in the Kenyan Navy. They tried to help us, and then we found this sort of winch.
If it weren't for this winch, we would not have got the boat in the water. We had also to float the boat at the spring tides, at the equinoxes when the tides are highest, or the water is highest. Again, if we had not timed it in this way, we would have not got the boat to the water.
See, the whole village, everybody's out trying to get this bloody thing into the water. Eventually we got rollers, I think.
Rollers and the winch and the chain block.
It's winches and chain block. And this is the Kenyan Navy. They're also heave-ho, heave-ho. It took about a week, didn't it?
It took us 5 days to get the boat to the water. And it's nerve-wracking because we really thought that maybe we would never do it and all our work would be in vain. And we couldn't, of course, because the boat was still very heavy, even though it had no ballast in, no mast, the water tanks are empty, it's still incredibly heavy. If we completed the boat on land, there'd be no way we could have got into the water. Luckily, it's a slight slope going down towards the waterfront, and this and working on this chain block for days and days on end, bringing it in inch by inch. We had to anchor the chain block in the mud, work between tides, and then just take off time when the water came in. And it's hot tarning work.
That's me.
There's David. Fundi Kombi, Fundi Mzee, Fundi Busli.
And Fundi David.
Fundi David, yeah. Looking not much less black.
Actually, if you notice, we don't have an audience now.
Yeah,
they obviously got bored.
Yeah.
As the boat gets closer to the water, there's a tradition that when the first waters hit the boat for the very first time, you sprinkle the blood of a sacrifice. But here traditionally, we slaughtered a goat.
Yeah, which you then ate.
Which then had a big party and ate.
Which is good. You don't just give it up to God or something. You eat it, which at least is economical.
The mast is a story in itself. There was a real problem finding a mast. And you found it at some strange little island.
Yeah, we found some little island somehow. And we put a topmast on it, but it was, again, this is one of the things, we considering maybe making a mast, maybe ordering a steel mast from Mombasa, making a laminate. I know we talked to Rodney about making a laminated mast. We had all sorts of ideas. We found this fabulous piece of wood which had been impregnated with tar, and we bought it for a song, and it did just the trick. But it was a great piece of timber. We were very lucky to have found it because all the alternatives were.
Now, to get the mast vertical was quite a problem, but it took 3 days.
Again, we have no machine tools. It's all muscle power and as they say, Swahili, kazi bongo, brain work.
Yeah,
just working things out from first principles and trying to think how the hell could you get it done. I think Lamu and the boat. It certainly made me more pragmatic. also made me more prone to see professional life as problem solving based on what you've got and finding the problems, the best and quickest problems to particular solutions, and cutting through the sort of ideological backgrounds we have and finding the best solutions in a pragmatic way. Now the next problem was to get the boat round to where we could start completing the deck, and it had no ballast.
Which means the boat was unstable and would fall over. So we had to get ballast and
urgently,
and the final ballast were chunks of iron, which Colin had scrap iron, I think.
It was pigs of iron,
which Colin had ordered in Mombasa. But in the meantime, we needed some temporary ballast. And again, this man Batru came in, and he provided us with what's called millstones, which is basically big stones for grinding corn.
This is the ballast coming in, I think, from Mombasa. See how they plough through the water. It's real like a ploughing. They're wonderful aerodynamic shape, these sails. But they only work if the wind is in
behind you or on the side of you.
Yeah, in the right side, in the right direction. They're designed for the traditional winds here, which blow 6 months in one direction, 6 months in the other direction. Here's a boat floating, because we couldn't really complete, we had to do the final fitting out of the boat in the water. That's the dinghy that Rodney and I made in Kampala and brought it down. And this is how we used to get ashore when we made landfall, or we couldn't bring the boat in close to land. We used the dinghy to get ashore.
So, and the very high tides, the water overflowed onto the quayside, didn't it?
Yeah, it's spring tides.
Oh.
We moored the boat just opposite the house, so we could look out over the house and just take the dinghy out there every day and work on her. We got the sails from Uncle Stan, who was Rodney's uncle, who was a sailmaker in Southend. Though he didn't have enough money to buy an engine, we would have a good set of sails. He made us a superb set of sails and had them sent out. Now this is how they used to start off, and we took some clues from this for how we managed our boat. You tied the sail up on the the boom, and then give it a yank, and it just coming out, and then you could start off straight away. And we used this technique also for our boat, because we had no engine in our boat. We had no motor. We had to be able to maneuver it very quickly, take the wind out of the sails and put the sails up very, very quickly, and we used this technique.
These are these big Arabian sailing boats. The boat is going past our boat. There's our boat and there's the Arab boat.
Oh, the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be breathing. Like the stillness in the wind before the hurricane begins, the hour that the ship comes in. And the seas will split and the ship will hit, and the sands on the shoreline will be shaking. Then the wind will sound and the waves will pound, and the morning will be breaking.
When we came out of Lamu for the first time on the way to the Seychelles, it is probably the most difficult part of all our journeys, because we were not, it's the first time we'd been in the open ocean. We hadn't been able to do proper sea trials, and water case started coming in all sorts of places, and we were all sick of dogs, so we just had to pump and pump and pump to stop the boat sinking. Because you don't realize how strong the wind is until you actually try to hoist the sail up into it or take it down in a strong wind.
And we'll be buried at the bottom of the ocean.
That first tacking out of the entrance and the boat bucking like she had never bucked and leaking and just thinking, what the hell am I doing here? This is crazy. And that was my worst experience. After that, you can't live at that fever pitch forever, and I settled into it and accepted it and loved it.
Jojo at this time, she was all tied up when she walked around the boat. Later on, she took off all the ropes and she would just walk around like a little monkey.
It took us about 3 weeks going to windward to go to the Seychelles. It's very tough going, but in the middle of this we met a boat called the Clan Maclay, and we asked them by signals, we signaled to them, asked them to give our location, because they had obviously mechanized ways of getting their location, and their location as they gave it to us, and our location as we had calculated it from the sextant sites was about a mile difference. So we were then pretty confident of our navigation.
The first land we encountered, which was Silhouette Island, I can see it now. I can see and smell the water and the looming great mountain of Silhouette, and that extraordinary feeling of wow, you know, we actually did it. We went across 1,000 miles or whatever it was of ocean, and we found this place. That's incredible.
But again, we've never done it before. We've never done any deep sea ocean. We are real novices at everything, but we lucked in.
This is the Seychelles. This is Port Victoria, the main town, which now is probably totally tourism. At the time, there was no airport there.
Yes.
It was really off the beaten track. This is wonderful, isn't it?
It's a real Caribbean shanty town, we're not in the Caribbean. And the volcanic islands, you'll see a bit of the landscape, dramatic sort of green, lush landscape. In those days, the main economy was coconut, which they used for ropes and fibres and for the milk and for the fruit.
This was the bus, I remember. They didn't have a bus, there was a local bus, And there's a little, that's right.
Big Ben,
Little Ben in the middle.
I loved getting to places. I mean, Rodney loved the sea, I loved the land. I loved the experience of arriving in new places.
The Seychelles group of islands is a group of about 100 islands, I think.
Something like that.
In the Indian Ocean, which nominally belonged to Britain and became independent, even though they were originally colonized by French. And the language there was all French patois. And we visited a few of these islands on the way down to South Africa.
The most famous one is called Aldabra, which, if you know your Darwin, it's very famous for the huge tortoises there.
This is our last stop, basically, I think, before we got down to beginning of the strait between Madagascar and the mainland. It was slow. I mean, the whole business, building the boat was slow, launching it was slow, sailing was slow. It was another time scale.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam.
Colin, you threw the rubbish out. I mean,
It wasn't ecological in those
oh,
days.
say, Jesus.
I think it's organic rubbish. I didn't throw nylon bags out. It was organic rubbish.
We had nylon bags.
Didn't have nylon bags in those days, thank goodness. Washing up, everything is done in the seawater. Washing ourselves, washing up and everything. Water, the water tank was just for eating.
Colin, cooking?
Your cooking was very important on the boat. It's, especially on long ocean voyages. The meals were very important. We used to have cooking competitions.
And I made cholent, which apparently was inedible.
Yeah, out of
Inedible.
corned beef. Out of corned beef. Because we had no refrigeration. So the only thing we had on a long voyage, you had to make do with corned tins of meat, potatoes, onions which keep, eggs which kept after a fashion. And that's it, no fresh vegetables. I made bread.
This is, Rodney's taking the position using a sextant, which is a traditional way of measuring the location of the stars and the moon and the sun.
I'm writing down the measurements. He calls them out. I write down the measurements, and then you do some calculations and look them up in tables, and you can get to your position.
We worked well as a group. We accepted Rodney's authority.
Yes, of course, as captain and as the mainstay of the whole business.
We accepted it, but we accepted the fact that he was in charge and he was the initiator.
Yes.
And we all played our part accordingly. And it was a bit like a kibbutz, you know, everybody did what he could and got what he could out of it. And the actual organization was almost, you know, it was like being a bit in the army. You have 4-hour shifts, 3-hour shifts. We split the cooking. One person was a cook per day. And when he was a cook, he didn't do watches.
It's also meant physically in time, you work together very much. Someone was either in the kitchen or sleeping or on watch. Although you were in the same space, your time zones are different. I think another very important element was having Mjojo and Lulu aboard. They're sort of things in which we could all look after and relate to, and they sort of broke the ice. Kids are great icebreakers, you know. And you know, whenever you started getting grotty with each other, you know, kids were there to sort of break the ice and show, you know, what this is all about almost. They didn't say it in so many words, but you realise it gave you a sense of balance.
The other thing is we built the boat. So, I mean, the sailing was a continuation of a communal experience. So it worked well.
Durban.
Durban?
Yeah, it's Durban.
Och, please, Daddy, this is the...
Oh, please, Daddy, well, you take us to the drive-in, all 6, 7 of us, 8, 9, 10.
We want to see a flick about Tarzan and the Ape Man, and when the show's over, you could take us back again.
Popcorn, chewing gum,
Peanuts and bubble gum, ice cream, candy floss and Eskimo pie.
Och, Daddy, are we moss, niggables and licorice, Pepsi, Cola, ginger beer and Canada Dry. This is the sort of South African national anthem, came from a musical, and everybody is singing it when we are there, and so it spontaneously came to us.
The only instance that I was scared, really scared, and that was from all the things we went through, including all the high winds and the low winds and all the rest of it. The only time that I couldn't move out of fear was when we went into Durban Harbour. It was late at night, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
we couldn't see anything. We didn't know.
We couldn't see
Very
anything.
narrow entrance, big boats coming out. You heard this whoa, whoa. Suddenly this great big grey hulk of thing will come looming out the list and whiz past you. And they had no way of seeing us.
We tried to make signals to make contact that we're coming in, and I don't think anybody knew. And Rodney decided, well, if we don't go in now, then the wind's going to blow us off, and it's going to take 3 days to get back and to go in again. So we went in, and we had to do what's called tacking, which is to go against the wind.
And there we were, going through these great big hulks coming out, this mournful sound. And the other thing about fog is it distorts direction. You hear the whoa coming from one side, and the ship comes from that side. See, it's totally unpredictable. And that's the time, I think that's the time I remember being really shit scared.
Rodney was superb, and he gave all instructions what to do, etc. And I remember doing it automatically, but I was really shit scared. I mean, I really was. If somebody hadn't told me what to do, I would have been frozen on the spot.
We had to stop off in Durban because we got there too late in the season to go down the Cape.
If you wanted to go around the Cape of Good Hope, you can't do it in the winter. You have to wait for the spring to do it.
And so Dave and I and Rodney, we all worked in architects' offices and paid off our debts, and only then were we able to complete our journey around the Cape of Good Hope and go off to Brazil and thence to England.
They were saying goodbye to Durban. We're going around the Cape of Good Hope, and here when we started sailing, we had all the sails up. There was a light wind and all the sails were up. And then slowly the winds got stronger and stronger. I mean, it's a journey of about a week, I think. And eventually, when we eventually sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, we had no sails up at all. We were going at full speed with no sails, just the wind going through the rigging and through the boat itself propelled us forward.
And because the wind was right behind us, there's a danger that if the wind is behind you, the boat is basically unstable. It can skew like a corkscrew in the water and turn upside down. And Cape Town was a nice contrast to Durban, I must say.
Very much. It's a
Lovely
very,
city.
very picturesque city.
We sailed from Cape Town.
To St. Helena.
We stayed in St. Helena about 2 weeks, which is a very fascinating little island, because on one side it's where the wind and the rain come, it's tropical and green, and the other side is a desert. Dave took some lovely films of it, which all got lost in the bus in Rio de Janeiro. For me, I think one of the things, the images that stay in my mind is when we were in the doldrums going over St. Helena to Rio de Janeiro. A suddenly at the horizon, you know, in Rio de Janeiro they have this big figure of Christ, Corcovado, with his arms stretched out, Christ the Redeemer, this enormous statue standing up on this rock. And suddenly this appears above the clouds. Like a miracle, there was Christ standing there. You know, this image you can't get out of your mind.
I remember just at night being by the helm and looking at the stars.
Yeah.
And just thinking how wonderful.
Yeah. You don't see the stars in the city. You've forgotten. You've probably never seen stars like we used to see the stars.
When I was last in the middle of the night looking up at this clear sky, looking at the stars and helming the boat, it's just wonderful. I mean, just I think that's my memory. That's my basic memory. And then the arrival in Rio, which was unbelievable. What Colin didn't tell you was that we arrived. We saw Christ up there. And then we put up our flag, and we waited for the etiquette is that you put up your flag and say that you want to, which indicates that you want to come into the port, and they send out a port officer who comes and checks you, decides if you go into quarantine or no, and lets you in. We waited, I think, a couple of days and nobody came. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to hell with this, and we sailed in. So we actually, I don't think there's any record of us ever going into Brazil.
Tristeza não tem fim, felicidade sim. A felicidade é como a gota de orvalho num uma pétala de flor. Brilha tranquila, depois de leve oscila e cai como uma lágrima de amor. A felicidade do pobre parece a grande ilusão do carnaval. A gente trabalha o ano inteiro por um momento de sono pra fazer a fantasia.
David left us in Rio to go to Israel, and Colin elected to stay in Brazil to pursue an architectural niche he was carving. Rod and I found a new crew and set off for the UK, but it wasn't the same sailing without our friends. The bonds formed over the years of close-quarter living were tight, and it was hard adapting to strangers. We sailed due north up the Atlantic to the UK, where we slid slowly into a 9-to-5 existence. After a few years of normal life, the sea called Rod back. He bought a boat and followed his heart back to the waves. But in 1982, while crossing the Atlantic, he disappeared. We don't know what happened and can only imagine the scenario with horror and a sadness that doesn't lessen with the years. My 2 daughters and I grieve for him still. But the spirit of Rod lives on in his elder daughter, who has followed in her parents' wake. She bought a boat and sailed across the Atlantic with her husband and 2 children, using the same natural talent that her father had. And then there are the 3 of us, David, Colin and me, who remain from Mjojo's original crew. The deep abiding friendship between us is alive and flourishing. They're my 2 oldest and dearest friends, and I treasure the many moments of laughter and sadness that we have shared. Mjojo also lives on. A young Dutchman called Tom fell in love with her when he found her rotting in a Dutch canal, a neglected houseboat. He has restored her to her former beauty and strength and intends to sail her once more on the blue oceans.